Hey there, and welcome to the Death to Vanilla podcast. I'm Stephen Burkhart, the host of the show and the founder of Burkhart Creative Agency. If you're looking for fresh ideas and tactical advice on how to take your marketing to the next level, you have come to the right place. We interview industry professionals who teach us how to courageously create, boldly innovate, and experiment, and they teach you to do the same. Now, we are super grateful that you're here and watching, but if you're looking to get off your phone and have a little less screen time, we have an audio-only version of the show, and we have links to that show in the description below. Without further ado, let's get into the show.
I wanna cause no problems. I just wanna live my life, but I keep on hearing about nonsense. Me and my dons ain't mobsters, but you know when you see imposters. We know how to read them faces, same way you know how to read them comments. If you wanna talk, let's talk, but around here, make sure you're walking your talk is constant.
Well, hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Death to Vanilla podcast, and I have an incredible guest on today, and his name's Eric with Tap That AZ podcast, and he's done lots of other things that we have subtly placed here that you can see, and just started some other ventures, like you've leveraged it into Taste of AZ, starting to talk more about like the food industry and things like that, and you've got many other dreams that I'm excited to share. But just in general, this show is about getting noticed instead of getting ignored. And so he has done all these amazing things, sometimes on purpose, sometimes not. But either way, you've got noticed, right? And so I actually think you're probably one of, if not like one of the leading podcasts in Arizona, and then continuing to expand and grow. And that's super exciting. So I'm fanboying a little bit today. But yeah, so I'd love for you to just brag on yourself just for a little bit and just talk to us a little bit about who you are and what you do and how that all started.
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up in northeastern Ohio, like right outside of Youngstown, Ohio, between Cleveland and Pittsburgh. So we were talking about Erie, Pennsylvania a minute ago, right? So very blue collar, but there was a lot of creativity that was, underneath the steel mills and things like that. So I always had a spark of creativity, but never really had an opportunity to let it shine until I started a podcast in 2016. Actually, 2015, I started a blog I did one beer review. I wrote a story about my 2-year-old daughter going to the bathroom on the floor, and it was like a mystery caper of like who did it, right? So I had like 2 blog posts, and that was like my first taste into like, taking that step, because I was always apprehensive. I quit drawing when I was a kid because I couldn't get it the way that I wanted it to look.
Right.
So I gave up, And now I tell my 9-year-old, because she loves drawing, I'm like, don't give up. Like, don't, like, I know it doesn't look like what you want it to look like, but keep going. And that was, a year ago. Now she's loving drawing. So 2016 was the first time I actually took the risk, and it was a music podcast that segued into a beer podcast that segued into a beer book, into a food podcast, and now a magazine. I guess that's the long and short of it.
Right.
But it was just kind of
made it sound so easy.
Yeah. It's been well. The thing is I've always had this feeling that I was meant to do something, right? And my grandma always told me that too, right? That's what grandmas do. But she was always like, you were meant for something special. And she was always really creative. Both her and my mom were artists, not by trade, but just, out of hobby. But so I knew there was something, there was that burning desire of like, there was something meant for me. And, I go through my 20s and early 30s, mid 30s, and I'm like, where is it? I've been having this faith and just, that something's out there. And then when I got introduced to food and beverage in Arizona, specifically beer, it was like, okay, this is something, because I don't want to make the beer, but I like to take pictures and I like to write about it. And I was just taking that first risk and then diving from there pretty much.
So what you're saying is you'd have to get started doing something to get the ball rolling.
Yeah.
But no, that's really cool. It's cool that you dared to believe your grandma.
Yeah. Well, for the longest time, it felt like a curse, right? Because it was like, okay, like this thing is burning inside me. I know, and I would tell myself that, where there was jobs that I should have done really well at but I struggled because I just wasn't into it. And I would tell myself like, all right, when you find this thing, like you better step up to the plate, right? So I had that drive and that desire. And then when I got a little bit of a flicker of that light, I was like, okay. And I knew, and it still is developing as time goes and it changes, but I see that like my purpose is to tell the story of food and beverage in Arizona.
Right.
So that clarity from 5 years ago till now it's been a pretty amazing journey.
Right. Well, and I have to say the timing of that is pretty nice because, I mean, granted, I'm 35, so I've only been of drinking age for a little more than a decade, but I feel like those industries in Arizona have grown dramatically, and so it's kind of a pretty convenient timing there that you want to talk about them, and all of a sudden, like the place that we're in at, right, Simple Machine Brewing, is like, this is new. Like, I feel like every other day there's a new brewery opening up and serving incredible food and beverage, and so the opportunity for you to actually have something to talk about is growing too, which is really neat.
Yep. Absolutely, and that's what's cool too, and that's that, beer is where it started. And I started seeing, when I started in 2017, there were 50 breweries, maybe 50 to 60 breweries. Now there's like 110. So there was a bill that was passed in 2015. Yeah, it was 2015 that basically opened the doors for craft beer. Like there was a ceiling on what they could do. Basically, if you got too successful, you had to shut down. Like you couldn't have a tap room open. And I'm probably messing this up because I'm not I'm not into the laws. But basically, something happened that lessened the requirements that people could have a place like this, and not just be production. Right. Just be a factory that's pumping out beer, through the back. But you see beer coming up, you see the whiskey coming up. There's a distiller in Tucson called Hamilton Distillers that has one of the best single malts in the country, and people don't know that. Yeah. Right. And they're making it with, it's like the same style as Scotch, but they make it with mesquite that's grown in Arizona, like Arizona mesquite. Yeah, so that's cool. It's a smoky whiskey that tastes like the Southwest. Huh. So as I started, it was a music podcast that we had a segment called "What the F Are You Drinking?"
Yeah, that's fantastic.
And I was always drinking local beers. And my buddy was in Florida. We would Skype and we'd talk about music, and then I would edit it and pull in music. But we were always, I was always drinking local beer, so we would tag the breweries in them. And then the breweries were like, "Hey, you should come in." Matt from Peoria Artisan over in Peoria said, "Dude, come in and do a live podcast." Yeah. And I had no idea how to do it. But my buddy was like, "Dude, it's a good opportunity. He understands business a lot more than I do." Sure. I'm more of the creative side, the marketing side. But he's like, "Dude, craft beer is growing. People are reaching out to you to say, hey, can you come out and check us out?" So I was like, "That's cool. Sure."
So obviously, when you grow something, sometimes it's very intentional and sometimes it's very organic. Sometimes I really hate those organic stories because sometimes I feel like I'm trying so hard and someone's like, "I just started blogging and then I got all this traffic." And it's like, screw you, buddy. So what I would love to hear is, was it organic for you? And if so, in retrospect, what were you doing that was starting to really work? You know what I'm saying? Because when you look back at it, you can kind of see I was passionate about it. Okay, well, that's cool, but that doesn't explain it so much as you could say I was writing really in-depth articles, or it was very personal, or you know what I mean? So in retrospect, what were you doing that was just building that success?
I think I just kept doing it, number one. Someone's like, "Dude, you've just been around. You've just stuck around." And
not quitting is a great way to win.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that was it. And I mean, the support of my wife is that's the linchpin of the whole thing. Because, she would be the one that we'd be sitting on the patio and I'm stressed out because I hate my job and I want to find out what I want to do. So now she saw it earlier than I did, that she saw that I was onto something, and she saw in me that it was something different, right? So for her support is that she's always been very adamant about be yourself, do it the way, if I would want to do something, she's like, "That doesn't sound like you, don't why would you do that?" I'm like, "Well, these people are doing it and it's working for them." She's like, "That is not you though." Right. So I've had that I don't know, that drive to do it the way that I want to do it. And not in a selfish way, but just if I'm going to do it, I don't want to just replicate what somebody else does. Right. I want to put my own, because I'm committed to this at this point. Once I found this path, I'm like, okay.
You came too far.
Yeah. Now, so I think that's been kind of the key. And it's frustrating, right? Because you do see, people grow at exponential rates, and you know, once you kind of know the behind the scenes stuff, some of it's shady, some of it's not. But once again, my wife comes in, she's like, who cares? Right. Who cares what they're doing? Yeah. Focus on what you're doing. So, and being able to stick to that and then being consistent was a huge thing. I mean, it'd be Monday night and I would be up late editing a show, and she'd be like, does it really matter? I'm like, yes, it matters, So, and I haven't been consistent, I don't do every Tuesday, and there's a time where there's 2 weeks in between, but I just keep coming back, right. And I keep doing it because I love doing it. I think that's really, it's that fuel that's, and now I'm starting to see things that I'm like, okay, there's a monetary side to it. It's not just faith and enjoying yourself. Now it's catching on to things that are actually bringing money to the house, which is the goal.
Well, yeah, and I think there's always that opportunity, and I think sometimes people could feel a little weird about it, especially if they've been doing it for free for so long. Mm-hmm. But the reality is anytime there's an exchange of value, there's usually some monetary exchange as well. Yeah. You know what I mean? And so there's nothing wrong with that, and I'm excited for you because of that something that you're passionate about isn't just emotionally rewarding. Right. It can be financially rewarding too, and why not? Because all of the attention that you're bringing, all these people who are doing good things is of value, and you should get paid for that. Yeah. I think one thing I think is interesting that I want to unpack a little bit is what you described to me as far as doing things your way is kind of in marketing what they call like positioning, which is what place in the market do you take up, right? And so you talked about how some people were doing things one way and you were doing things your way. Yeah. So what was the contrast? Give us a picture of, and I'm not asking you to like call anyone out or anything, but what were people doing that you were like, oh, okay, I'll just copy that? Because that's not necessarily a terrible idea. Like if people are doing things that work, then inherently there's some winning in there. But what were they doing that you saw that was working, but then how did you end up positioning yourself instead?
So I think it was because I focused on, I wasn't real caught up in what was in the can, right? That was the thing, or in the glass or whatever it was. Like I wasn't real caught up on that. That was like the, obviously the taste.
We're talking about like the science of it, like the actual brewing.
Even just the beer, even just the beer. Like that wasn't what really drew me in. I mean, obviously that's what draws you in, right? It's you seek a beer, like you look for the IPA, you look for what you want. But what really drew me in was like the feeling that you got when you went into a brewery. Growing up outside of Youngstown, Ohio, super blue collar, right? But there's also that creativity. So that's what brewing is. That's what, and I would say it's the same for cooking and probably a lot of things, but brewing is beer is what I'm most familiar with. But it's creativity, but then you have to have the work ethic, right? You could have the best recipes, you could have the best can art, but if you're not willing to put the work in, and these guys work a lot and not like, they're sweating, they're hot, it's not a glamorous job. But so that's what I wanted to highlight. So I think that was what my differentiator was. You have a lot of beer podcasts and beer influencers that, they talk about the alcohol content, they talk about the hops, they talk about, those stats that are just, I don't know, to me they're kind of boring, right? I mean, anybody can read a stat and say, oh, this isn't, I don't know, I could go off the deep end. But so for me, that wasn't an interest. My interest was, I want to tell the story of you. Like you are back there, you did something you hated for 15 years and you made beer in the garage and you loved it and, you found your path. So I'm going to tell your story, and there are times where I forget to talk about the beer. It's towards the end, I'm like, oh yeah, let's talk about the beer. And I think that's been a big differentiator because I've kind of built a fan base from within the industry. Right. So people within the industry really like the podcast, they really like what I do. And they listen to it because they might know the brewery down the street, like they might see them every single day, but they're not going to sit down for 45 minutes and say, hey, tell me your story.
Yeah,
right? That's what my
because the guy's busy back there working. Yeah.
And when they see each other, like, hey, dude, what's going on? Oh, not much. They're catching up, quick things, but they're not going to sit there and they don't know the whole story behind Brian Helton. And so that's what really drew me in. Number one. The listeners liked hearing that because it was a change of pace, and the breweries loved it because they knew I wasn't going to come in and critique their beer, right? Because, not to talk smack, but most of the people that are critiquing beers don't know what they're talking about. Uh-oh. They really don't.
Oh, he's calling them out.
Yeah, oh yeah, it is. I mean, and yeah, that fires me up. But there are some really good guys out there that know their stuff, and it's, even if you don't like this beer, like, respect what the person is doing back there. Mm-hmm. These guys are, these guys and women, and it's a very diverse industry, and they're working hard to, provide a product that they're not getting rich off of. It's not like they're
right.
Yeah.
So, do you think that comes from your blue collar background of, like, because the thing I think of when you're talking about these stories is this idea that, and I mean, and we experience this too, like, we're behind the camera, they're behind the wall brewing. It's this kind of this idea of bringing people, like, out of the back room. And I feel like that's probably inspired a little bit by your blue collar background, where someone has, like, forged the metal that goes into your car, but you would never know them.
Yeah, and there's some great stories there, right? I mean, there's some really great stories. Yeah, and they're not the ones that get highlighted a lot, but yeah.
Well, and I think that's so cool because, and I like to think that we talked about this when we talked earlier, is this idea of some people, especially when they've been in an industry for a long time, forget how cool it is.
Sure.
And forget the fact that, like, it's interesting and other people find it interesting. And so you have, like, for example, like the thing I always think about is like the Gold Rush show on TV, where, like, they're just, like, mining for gold. How on God's green earth do you make a show about that? Right. Digging holes in the ground and discovering gold, and yet there are. And guess what? I'm kind of curious how that process is. Never once have lost a lick of sleep about wondering about that, but now that there's a show about it, now I'm kind of curious.
You gotta know.
And so, and I think brewing is quite a bit more interesting than that. But but not a lot of people are talking about it, and so I do think it's a cool niche that you discovered, which is the stories of the people, because yes, it's if you're a connoisseur or a nerd or whatever you want to call it, like, yes, exactly how they process the hops, I'm sure, is super fascinating for everyone else.
Sure.
You know what I mean? The process of how that all happened and the stories of the people who make them, I think, are interesting too, because I have no idea what drives the passion of a brewer. You know what I mean? Because some of what they're doing is on a spreadsheet. Some of it's, like, really cool, like pouring things in. I don't know. It's just, what kind of commonalities did you find in their stories?
Blue collar. Definitely a lot of blue collar, for sure.
Feel like they're secret artists.
Yeah, a lot of them are. A lot of them are musicians, artists of different sorts. A lot of them came from food backgrounds too. So, like, chefs coming into because it's cooking, right? You're just boiling grains, and then you're fermenting it. That's pretty much what it is, So you get a lot of people from the food industry. But you know what? I don't know. There's such a range. There's such a range of people. There's IT people. There are people that come from food and beverage. So I guess a common theme would be homebrewing. They were all homebrewers, and it was always something that had some positive energy around it. There was always, it's not like they're like, we were homebrewers and it sucked, but I think we're going to be able to make a business out of this. That's sometimes the opposite of the problem, right? They're like, we make great beer. Everybody tells us our beer is great. Well, it's what is the book? The E-Myth. You ever read the E-Myth?
I have not yet, but
it's a good one. I just read that recently, but it basically breaks it down into a business as 3 different parts. It's a technician, a manager, and a entrepreneur, right? So what happens is a technician is such a good technician that they don't think the entrepreneur and the manager know what they're doing. So the technician leaves their spot to open up their own spot, but then when they start to make the product, they don't realize that they need those other 2 things. Technicians alone will, So, So same thing, like, you're a good cook. Okay, can you, like the guy you were telling me about, can you run a kitchen? Right? You might be able to be the best cook. Like me, if I have 3 people looking over my shoulder, I collapse, But just me and the family, I can make all kinds of good stuff. But yeah, I think the homebrewing part of it, and just it being a neighborhood thing, and breweries are kind of the extended version of that. You're making beer here,
right,
and all your friends are coming and hanging out and drinking. So.
But now they're paying you.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly.
As they should. Okay. Cool. So you position yourself in a way that you were talking about the stories of the people instead of the beer itself, and then you're showing up consistently. So what happened after that? So you're showing up. What kind of opportunities ended up presenting themselves to you because of that?
So I'd say the key is my business partner.
Okay.
So he reached out to me. My business partner, Luke Irvin, reached out. I don't know, this was like early 2018 before a beer festival. And he was like, hey, I think he had just turned 21. So it's funny, the age difference is, I'm almost double his age, but he's the mature one. He's the one that's, I'm the off the wall, head in the clouds person. But
he's the entrepreneur.
Yeah, well, so we're kind of a little bit of both, because he's a technician and he's a manager and he's the entrepreneur. I'm like the visionary type of, hey, let's make a beer and put, a bandana around it and call it Jean-Claude Bandana. Those are the things, and I'm working on that. So
that's fantastic. That's fantastic.
But he's basically the one that came in and was like, hey, you have this great following, because he was in a different industry. He was just kind of tired of working doing photo, video, web design, all that stuff. He's like, this craft beer thing looks really cool. I'd love to, meet you. And I'm like, well, there's a beer festival this weekend. You should come and, we should meet up. So I had a table set up at this festival, and I was selling shirts, and I had the podcast set up to do like a live podcast, but I was by myself. And my wife that morning was like, who's going with you to sell the shirts? I'm like, I don't know. I didn't think about that. So he showed up, and he was selling shirts. He was handing out stickers, taking photos. So we just really connected. And within a few months, we did the Arizona Beer Book. So that was maybe another thing we should have had on the table, is the book over there. So it's like a hardcover. Sure. Yeah. So that was our first project as business partners. Mm-hmm. So it was like, hey, let's, honestly, this sounds funny. I don't even think I knew his last name, but when we started doing the book, I thought because his company name was like, was it like Luke Wayne Media? So he'd sent me something. I mean, this is as we're partway through writing the book, right? Sure. And it says like Luke Irvin. I'm like, who's Luke Irvin? He's like, well, that's my last name. I'm like, what's Wayne? He's like, it's my middle name. I'm like, man, but we just connected, and we did this book. Neither of us had done a book before. And the partnership's just been great, because the things I'm good at and the things I enjoy are the things he doesn't enjoy and that he's not necessarily good at, So it works out really well, and he's got really good business sense. So I think that was the biggest key of is finding somebody that could understand the craziness of all of my ideas, and my ability to build a network. I mean, that's been the key to the whole thing. Sure. Is I can have all these crazy ideas, but if nobody wants to listen to me, that doesn't matter.
So what was the purpose of having the book?
Just to a few reasons is to kind of highlight what we can do, because we provide services like photo, web design, magazine, obviously, if you want a magazine printed. I don't know if Luke will be willing to take that on. Print somebody else's magazines, What was the question again? Sorry.
Oh, no, you're good. So I was asking why you guys made the book to begin with.
Oh, so he'd always wanted to do a book. Somebody had mentioned to me a few times, a couple people had said, dude, you should do a book about beer. And I was the same. I'm like, I don't know much about the beer to write that much about it. Right. But they were like, well, write about the story. So when I mentioned it to Luke, he's like, dude, I've been wanting to do like a really cool, coffee table style book. Right. So he put together a project plan and a budget, and we did it. Right. So we created the book, and it was to, kind of showcase what we have the ability to do, and almost kind of just an introduction into what we're planning on doing.
Right. No, I think that's amazing, and we're talking about standing out. This is a beautiful book.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing we want to do. Everything we do, we want it to be quality. I mean, we could have put together some, soft cover book to turn out really nice, but we're like, let's take it up a notch. Let's make it a hard cover. We only covered 35 places in that one, 35 breweries, and then there was a cider house in Mesa and a meadery up in Prescott. But yeah, so it's volume 1. So the plan is to do 2 to 3 volumes of it.
Is it the meadery that's like that downstairs in that one?
Yeah.
Like, okay, yeah. I went there for the first time like 2 months ago.
Okay. What'd you think?
Well, I'd never had mead in my whole life.
It's interesting, right?
It's different.
Yeah.
There was definitely some I did not like at all. Yeah. And then some were like, okay, like this is pretty good, but it's just like it's just a different vibe.
It is, yeah. But they're world renowned. Like they're known as like one of the best in the world.
They have good charcuterie boards too.
Yeah. You can't go wrong with that. Yeah.
Even if they're like $30.
So I wish, as you asked that, I wish I had a better answer as to why do we do the book. But it was just like, let's do it.
This is one of these annoying organic things that I was talking about, where it's like, oh, like this is actually a really good idea, and you're like, oh, we just thought it'd be cool. But no, what I love about this is, and we were talking about this early before the podcast started. We can dive into the magazine too if you want to show that off. So we live in this crazy world that everything's getting more and more digital, more online, which is awesome. It means that you can make something and for way less money distribute it to literally anyone, anywhere.
Yeah.
If this magazine was digital, do you guys have a digital version?
Digital, yeah. We just put up.
Yeah, someone in like Korea can find it and have your magazine as opposed to shipping it over there, which has got to be just astronomical.
Right.
So right, and so that's really cool. And so we have this idea of like, how does a business stand out? And now you have a situation where everything's going digital and you actually are holding something in your hand. Yeah. And I think that's really cool. Like, we were talking about before, it's like as things get more digital, things that are physical get more and more novel.
Yeah.
And so then you have this thing where like you do actually stand out because of the fact that you have a book, and in spite of it, because it's like, who can say that they have this? Yeah. And you can leave this places and you can give it to people and it can be a gift. And all of a sudden your brand is all over the place, especially since so much of what you're talking about is local, right? It's AZ podcast, right? It's not like the whole world podcast. And so I think that's super awesome. Obviously, there's no one thing that a business is going to do that you're going to do that's going to be the total game changer, and nothing else you do is going to matter in comparison. But it is one of those big things where like this is like a cool way to represent yourself other places. Yeah. I think it helps you stand out. And this magazine's dope too.
Thanks, man.
It is.
Food. I love food. You like food?
Yeah. Okay, so talk a little bit about how you transitioned into this, because one business success can feed into another, right? That's why people have personal brands, because their personal brand feeds into their businesses. So you started with the Tap That AZ podcast and that resource, and now we have Taste of AZ. So how did you end up leveraging that from a business growth perspective into the Taste of AZ?
So Tap That is, the Arizona Craft Beer podcast, but there was an episode with Helio Basin. They used to be, Tombstone Brewing now has their north location there. It's like 40th and Thomas. They shut down during COVID, but their chef was phenomenal. So it was like their chef at the beginning, Tamara Stanger. And when I was doing the episode with them, they were like, hey, do you care if we have our chef Tammy join? And I'd eaten there before, and her stuff was like off the wall, like a lot of like native, ingredients and stuff, like pickled choya buds and like all this stuff. You're like, what is this? And I don't care. I eat everything, except the horseradish. I don't like horseradish. I even tried it this past week, and I still don't like it. But everything else is on the table.
For me, it's sauerkraut. It's like, no.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, man, I have two things of sauerkraut in my fridge.
Well.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And that's it?
Yeah, for the most part.
Okay.
But I do like horseradish within certain portions.
A reasonable amount. Yeah.
It's hot.
Yeah. It is pungent for sure.
Yeah.
So when I did the episode with them, and Tamara joined in about halfway through, and she started talking about how she forages and she goes out into the desert and picks ingredients that she's either going to use in a dish that night, or she'll preserve it for, so
cool.
Yeah, super cool. And that really opened my eyes. And she moved to Utah, hopefully temporarily at this point, because she opened a spot in Tempe called Cotton and Copper. Was a really cool spot, and then COVID hit, and they're kind of it's not fine dining. But it's higher cost food, right? I mean, she has like some pretty obscure stuff, but it's fantastic. But anyways, so that spot closed, and she opened a new spot in Utah, which just looks amazing. And people are predicting that she's going to win some awards in this situation she's in, because she's top notch. So before she left a couple months ago, I had a couple beers with her, and I said, "You changed my life. She changed my life, because I thought it was like, beer's cool, and I'm telling the stories, and this is fun. I don't know where this is going to go. Maybe I'll, start a career in, or have a social media company or whatever." I didn't really have an idea of what I wanted to do. But when I met her, that opened up the doors. I'm like, okay, food can be really interesting, right? Because I wasn't interested in, French cuisine and fine dining and all the stuff that I thought the limitations kind of were.
Sure.
And then when I met her, I'm like,
it's either here or it's here. But there's actually
exactly
middle ground.
Yep, exactly. And so she really opened my eyes. And then that's when things really started to be like, all right, I want to start, because I didn't want Tap That to be watered down with, food, beer, It could be food and beverage, but I was like, what, it's the craft beer podcast. So let's keep it that. And then Luke and I launched in May of 2020, we launched a Taste of AZ podcast. So that was finally us jumping out and saying, okay, let's do a podcast. So it was May 2020. Within a couple months, once again, he was like, "Hey, should we do a magazine?" I'm like, "Dude, I've never done a magazine." He's like, "We've never done a book. Let's do a magazine." I'm like, "Okay, let's do it." And once again, I mean, he doesn't just come to me with these grand ideas. Like, he's got it down. He's like, "Here's how much we'll need to, make an ad sales. Here's how much we need to do with this. You want to do this?" I'm like, "Let's do it, man."
Right.
Yeah. So I mean, we've got the support of the advertisers, because it's a free magazine.
Yeah.
So it's free for places to carry. It's free for consumers to take, and it's just beautiful. And those are all his pictures for the most part. So yeah, I think the process of learning the process of the book basically helped us figure out that whole process.
Right.
Right. How do you design something? How do you get it printed? And
Well, I love that too. Even just from I appreciate from a branding perspective, right? Because the messaging and what it stands for and the product that you have, if it gets, like you said, if it gets too watered down, people start to wonder if it's really for them, right? Because they've gone to you for a specific thing for so long, and now it's changed, right? And people's loyalty usually only lasts as long as it's useful for them, and then once it starts to drift, well then, there's issues. So I love, from a branding perspective, that you decided to keep the messaging and the purpose and the positioning of Tap That where its home base was, and create something new. And even though creating something new is substantially harder, I feel, but at the same time, you were able to give it a life of its own and its own little niche, and be able to have its own position in the market, which I think is super important for anyone listening, right? From a branding perspective, things have to be what they are, and then when you try to make them be too many things, then it starts to get really goofy. It's not Coca-Cola water, it's Dasani. You know what I mean? So they're aware of the fact that yes, they're leveraging, and yes, all that, but there's equity in the name of a brand too, and so now you have Taste AZ that stands on its own, has its own brand equity, and people know what it's about and know to engage with it, and it'll be different people than Tap That, obviously, and so
it just should be.
Right.
You're gonna, when you open up the gates to all food and beverage, then that's a wide base.
Right. Totally.
That was exciting for me too, because as much as I love beer, I love food. That's been my thing forever, as if you couldn't tell.
Well, then I guess I love food more. I don't know. But I think so. So were you able to leverage your network then? I'm assuming.
Oh yeah.
Because now you need to have taste of Utah. If your friend is up in Utah, you know what I'm saying?
That might be kind of, well, I mean, that's like you said, it's harder to start another thing, but it's probably the best thing to do, right? Because so I've had people, breweries from out of state, some high profile breweries reach out and say, hey, our beer is going to be distributed in Arizona. We'd love to get on the podcast. And I've had to tell them no, because it's the Arizona Craft Beer Podcast. Right. If I just started letting everybody come in, it would lose what that niche that, I mean, from a marketing side, it's a niche that I found, but it's also just the niche I wanted.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it just happens to be good for marketing, but it's the niche that I want. I don't want it to be watered down. If I get a lot of opportunities in Denver, for these breweries to say, hey, we'd love to do a podcast up here, then that's a market we could open up in. But it's not going to be a taste of AZ. And right, yeah, exactly.
How many places can you be in once? Come on.
Right. Yeah. Well, the goal is to me. I don't know, this is me just dreaming out loud, but me be kind of I can kind of go to the places that I want. We have a team of, almost like a Vice style thing, where you have a team of people in each location, and so yeah, that's down the road a little bit.
Right.
Sooner than later,
well, if
later
you start
than
tasting
sooner.
Utah, I think I get royalty.
A commission.
That, so,
all right, fair enough.
So this is really cool too, and I'm glad we had this up there. Obviously this was on purpose. You have the beer now that you have. Well, you tell the story that you've collaborated with. So
this is Tap That AZ Hazy IPA. So this is a beer that I've kind of had in mind for a little while, and just waiting for the right timing and really the right place to talk with about doing it. And I have a lot of good relationships, but each person's on different levels. Some breweries might have great brewing capacity, but we're not going to be able to can a beer because they've got so many things that they have to fill. Me coming in and saying, hey, can you make me a custom label? They're like, yeah, dude, get in line. But then there are some smaller places that be like, yeah, come on in, let's make a beer, but they don't have the ability to create this marketing asset, which was a huge part of it. If we want this to grow into the Arizona beer, then it has to have some visuals to it.
Sure.
So I approached Marshall, the owner brewer here, and he's close to me. I'm 10 minutes up the road. I've known Marshall pretty much from the beginning. He's a good dude. He makes amazing beers. So all those things kind of came together, and I told him the idea, and he's like, let's do it, man. Let's do it. Because he's got the flexibility here to be able to do it, but he also has the following and the reputation to be able to sell it also, with our forces combined. But I wanted it to be like a Southwest IPA. So it's one of the hops they use is called Zappa. So it actually grows in the mountains in New Mexico. So it's like a wild hop. So it has people taste it and they're like, it tastes Southwest. Maybe it's, in their head, but it doesn't matter.
Perception is reality. Right?
Exactly. And then the grain we used is, you can see the logo. Oh, you know what? That's funny. This is the original can. So these were the original labels. We've updated them a little bit. But the second and third batches were made with Sonoran white wheat that's grown in Queen Creek at Grain R&D, which is part of Sauceman Farms, which is I think 100 years old, one of the oldest farms in history. No, I don't know.
Nobody fact check that.
No, please don't.
Sorry, CNN.
But the goal obviously we'd like to get to a point where we can make an all Arizona ingredient beer.
Right.
But it's a little bit challenging, so we're doing our best to make that. So that's how it came about, and then it sold really well. People loved it, so we keep making it.
Yeah.
And then shirts too. Also have shirts, some glasses. So.
Yeah, I saw I totally blanked on her name, but
Coley.
Yeah, Coley here had the shirt as well. So
yeah.
It's just so funny. You're just doing so many things right, and I love it.
Thank you. I hope I'm doing right. You question it sometimes.
Well, here you are, and here's your name on a can, and people are selling it.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. That sounds pretty good to me.
My friend Josh.
That's not making it. I don't know what to tell you.
Josh from Cider Core is a good friend of mine. He's a branding genius, and he's like, dude, use your name more. Yeah. Eric Walters. I'm like, all right. So when we wrote this, I'm like, I want my first and last name on the can. So that actually, they're more in planning. We've done 3 collaborations, I think. We've done a couple with Casual Pint. I just did one with Flying Basset, which is in Gilbert.
Okay.
And so we did a beer called Haka Shaka Laka. So it's a session hazy IPA. But what's really cool is a percentage of the proceeds is going to go to an organization called Smoke and Hope. So it's this guy, John Jones. Jonathan Jones, not the UFC fighter, John Jones.
Okay. I don't know,
No.
but I believe you.
Well, John Jones, a UFC fighter, is a little bit of a checkered past. So this is not
okay.
Jonathan Jones. Jonathan Jones is a backyard barbecue guy,
Okay.
content creator, really cool dude. So he started an organization called Smoke and Hope, which basically feeds hungry people in Phoenix. So a percentage of the Haka Shaka Laka is going to go towards his organization. So at this point now, Tap That was the first canned collaboration that I've done, and just seeing the potential with what we can do with that, of getting people's logos on the can. I mean, the marketing ability of craft beer is pretty phenomenal. It's an interesting little niche, and as a marketing guy, you can probably see all the little details and little things that you can do to set yourself apart.
Yeah. Can design is just, the labels on the cans.
Yeah.
Is just,
you were right,
it's top notch.
Yeah.
And, I'm most familiar with Helton, so that's like where I go to, but like his can design is so freaking dope.
Oh, yeah.
And I was actually, the funny thing is I was in Prescott the other day and I saw like someone littered. And but I saw his can, I immediately recognized it because I'm like, that's his artwork, man. It's so cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, obviously there's, it's a pretty committed, from what I can tell from the outside, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, it seems like a pretty committed group of people who just really love trying it. And so you have this like really loyal fan base. I feel this like, once they adopt you, I'm sure it's like a really good thing.
Yeah.
From a business perspective, and the fact that it's just nice to have people who like really dig what you do.
Yeah.
Which always feels good.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. It's that's been the amazing thing Brian Helton's been like my top guy from the beginning. And he's always, I'll get a random call from him and I'm like, hey man, just want to give you some feedback on something, or just, I can always go to him. I'm like, man, I got a question. I don't know what to do, dude. Like what, and he's always, he's always the guy that is happy to answer those questions. But like at this point, Marshall here, I can say, hey man, I've got an idea for this. Hey, I want to do a beer with the, this MMA fighter that's right up the road, and call it Jean-Claude Bandana, right? Second time I use that one.
Right.
But I have the ability to be able to do that because I put in the work of consistency and quality and being a good person and being reliable. So now, sometimes Luke, my business partner, he's like, it's crazy how quickly you can get a response from somebody and get a thumbs up. And I'm like, that was, a few years in the making though, and a lot of work of, but yeah, that network's been the biggest part of it, and you're right though, because I feel even more so with craft beer than food and beverage, or with restaurants, is there are a lot of people that have followed their dream, and they're really aware of like people trying to throw a wrench in that, so they're really skeptical. They are, so it is a little bit hard to get in, but I don't know. I want to say I didn't try, but I was just doing what I was doing, and it just kind of fit the vibe of what they were doing, And then, it doesn't work with everybody, There's not everybody has bought into what we do, and they don't get it or whatever. But yeah,
that's neat. I think, to me, the craft beer market feels very collaborative. I don't know if it really is, but from the outside, it appears as though it is, and I think that's really cool because I don't think that's always the case. Sometimes it wants to be the case, but isn't, and I found that to be true in the wedding industry. Yeah. They wanted to act like it was all very collaborative, but it wasn't.
Yeah. but it changes,
Yeah.
right? And like, what is collaborative changed from what it was 2 years ago, right? 2 years ago, collaborative, at least in beer, was let this brewery and this brewery get together and let's make a beer.
Yeah.
Now collaborative is let's get together with, we just did a beer here yesterday with a local like honey producer.
Oh, cool.
And they do like crazy infusions. So we did a
that's fun.
mango habanero, or not a mango habanero, it was a honey habanero blonde ale yesterday, right? So we did a podcast with them, Twisted Bee, and then they reached out and said, hey, we'd love to do a beer. Who do you think would make a good honey beer? I'm like, Simple Machine. So the collaborations have, I think, expanded outside of beer to now they're connecting with chefs, they're connecting with food producers, they're connecting with, charity causes, like a dog rescue organization, and having their branding on the can and giving back to it. So, it's almost like an endless playground of things for marketing.
Right.
But it's hard, I think, for a lot of these places because they're
For like the restaurants or for
restaurants and just food and beverage, I think, in general, because there's so much work going on back there that the marketing side of it kind of takes it's secondary.
Sure.
Almost. And with craft beer was almost like if you build it, they will come type of thing, right? You open up a new brewery, people are going to come.
Because of that loyal group.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Yep, exactly. But that's kind of changed over the last couple of years. You got to have something more. And I think the brands that have really excelled through this, and canning is a big part of it. These guys didn't have a canner before COVID, and they were forced in this situation where they had to start canning their beers to distribute it.
Oh yeah, because if you can only sell them out of a to-go,
so limited. Yeah. Yep. Exactly. And so, I mean, they might have the crowlers and things like that, but that was a game changer. But I think it's a challenge for a lot of food and beverage because I think they get help sometimes and then they get screwed, right? They get somebody that's going to come in and say, hey, we can gain this many followers for you. And they just don't understand marketing, right? It's that three parts again, all right, you might be a good technician and you might be a good manager, but are you an entrepreneur type of thing, right? So I think people have been burned. You get the, you can do it yourself type of thing, which is great, and you can. And that was part of Brian's episode. I know he was like, you got to grab the camera and do these things yourself, but it doesn't mean you're going to do it right. And
it doesn't even mean you have for you, part of the winning combination that we talked about at the beginning of this podcast was consistency.
Sure.
And it's of course you can pick up a camera and shoot.
Yeah.
Right? So, that doesn't mean you can show up every week.
Right. Right. And how do you differentiate yourself, right? And a lot of times with the breweries, they're kind of a neighborhood spot. That's kind of the premise behind it a little bit for some of these places, but I don't know where it's going. I lost my train of thought. I got distracted by a car going down.
No. Was it a cool car at least?
No, like a piece of junk. But it was really interesting. That car is out of place. That thing's going to catch on fire very soon.
Wheels just fall off.
Yeah. But differentiating themselves, right? It's hard. It's hard, right? Because it's almost got to be part of the plan, or an accident, right? Or get an expert to kind of come in.
Well, I think what's so funny about all of this is I wasn't necessarily thinking we'd be getting a branding conversation out of this, and yet I keep finding myself coming back to that because you're just doing so many of the things that I think are so healthy to have a solid brand, and we all know that like you're literally saying right now is that branding. And I don't mean just like what I mean is brand. I don't mean branding.
Sure.
Brand is what differentiates this place from another place, and especially in the brewing industry, as that continues to grow, that'll only become more important because there'll just be more competition. And no matter how collaborative you get, the reality is either someone's sitting in that seat or they're sitting in their seat.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's and obviously all boats rise with the rising tide, right? So obviously just bolstering the brewery industry is good for everyone, but there's that you still come back to that reality. And so why someone would choose here, they've got to have a brand that gives them something to grab a hold of why they made this choice rather than another place. Yeah. And so in like a positive way. Like you want certain people to want to go to certain places for the reasons they want to go there. Like, you know, if you have a place that's, I don't know, it's like super gritty and manly, that's like the kind of people that will probably show up, right? And if it wasn't that way, those people wouldn't feel that same way about going. And so what you've done, I think, are some really healthy things that just, if we could recap a little bit about that, which is you found your position in the market and you grabbed a hold of it in spite of the fact that there was other successful models. And I think that's like a really great first start for a lot of people. And even for businesses that already exist, I think maintaining that is important. And that's really what you talked about later, which is that you've had these other opportunities come in, that other people have pitched you with things that I'm sure were going to be lucrative or boost your name. You know, obviously those are all good things for you, but it would have watered down the brand. And so, you know, what happens when, you know, a business that exists now, like no matter who they are, no matter how big they are, if they start to lose their center, which I bag on them all the time, but I feel like Starbucks is losing their center, which is once they lose that, then what do they stand for anymore? And so I think you've been really healthy with that. You've taken other interests of yours and you've separated them, right? So that they can stand on their own 2 feet and have that. And I think that's amazing too. And so I think, and bolstering your brand with doing the collaborations where like your name of your podcast is on this can. Pretty cool. I would feel pretty cool. And your name is on here and all these other things. I think these are all incredible brand building things. And whether you did them on purpose or accident, you're doing them and you're doing them well. And someone can look at this and really take some great lessons out of this. And I think that's amazing. You know, and I do feel like you're kind of going down this personal brand route, which I think is really good because at the end of the day, the relation, and I'm literally the last 2 or 3 podcasts I've done, so this is cool that we're talking about this, is that it's just so about relationships. It really is. Like there's a reason that people are texting you back and calling you back right away. It's because there's like this relational equity that you built with them. And I'd love to hear your take on this. I just did a podcast 2 or 3 podcasts ago, and the guy was talking about there's this concept on ethos, which is that you're you're competent in what you're doing, that you're a good human being, and that you have good intentions with what you're trying to do. Those are like the 3 markers of like having like a good ethos. And so what I feel is like you're kind of in that place, and that's why it's so healthy, which is you're a good guy, right? You've built a podcast that's solid. It's shown up consistently for years. That's only gotten better, and it will continue to get better. And then you have this thing where like, hey, like I just want to tell your story. Like I want you to stand out for your story and not just about, you know, the percentage of hops that are in your beer. You know what I mean? As cool as that is, and as proud as that as I'm sure they are. Like, so I don't know. So what are your thoughts on that? Like, I feel like that's kind of where you've gotten. And if I had to like articulate what I think has been working for you, I feel like those things are it. I
like it, man. I can't disagree. You know, and maybe that's why it has come, I won't say easy, but seemingly easy. It's become smoothly, I guess. Is that a way I can say it? Naturally, it's come organically, or is the word you said, right? Is because those things that you recognize have been like essential part of it, right? I'm not going to compromise those things in order to, you know, I'm not going to abandon my wife and kids to, you know, go drink beer all the time. Though they drive you to want to do that sometimes, but no, they're great. But that's been the foundation of it, right? And also, I don't know. I think I struggled. Kind of, it was almost like I was finding my path, but the whole time I didn't realize I was on my path. I was struggling, like, where's my path? But I'm on it. I'm walking it.
Recognizing it.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, you always hear about, you know, if you have like a podcast, you should have an avatar. You should have your ideal audience. Like, who is your person? Give them a name, give them an age, what bands they listen to. And I tried that a few times, but everything just kind of came back to be like, well, that's me. Like when I describe my avatar, it's just like, you know, it's like 24-year-old female version of me, or it's a 32-year-ld male version of me. So.
Have you seen the 24-year-old female version of you? No. I'm like really curious right now.
No, mentally. Oh, that's not even good either, but no. but I would try that, and I'm like, I'm not going to even focus on that. So my audience kind of developed itself, right, in a way. But I always read, when you're kind of creating a personal brand or you're, really doing anything, if you're right in the middle, like you're not taking any risks, right? So, but I struggle with that, right? Because people are like, dude, you need to be more critical on the beers, right? Because I'll try a beer from here, I'm like, oh, dude, that's great. And I'll say a couple things. I'm like, oh, it's hoppier than I thought it was going to be, and I'll move on to the next one.
Sure.
But they're all good to me, right? If I drink one, I'm like, oh yeah, that's malty, right? I don't like malty beers, but I'm not going to say, oh, dude, that's a 3, right? I'm not going to critique it. So that ended up becoming, because I was like, man, unless I can, be this hard ass, Anthony Bourdain, like, oh, this is, whatever. I'm like, I'm not gonna be polarizing, right?
Sure.
But what ended up happening, there were people like, dude, there's no way every beer's that good. Like, so people would get annoyed that I was so nice. So
right.
I'm like, all right, I can lean into that. I can be the nice guy. I can be the likable guy. So that's kind of when that realization came. I was like, okay, now it can be even more natural, because it wouldn't have been natural for me to try to review beers and things like that. I've done a couple beer reviews, but they've turned into like just funny stories.
Sure.
That really had nothing to do with the beer. So I think that's been a thing that kind of fell into my lap in a way. As part of the branding was just like, okay, just being myself, I can be a brand by just being a nice guy.
Sure.
So.
And yet people are still annoyed.
They are. Oh yeah, yeah. I get it all the time.
What does Grant Cardone say? If nobody hates you, you're not doing anything worthwhile. Or it's something. I'm probably butchering the quote.
I know what you mean, though. Yeah.
But so if people hate you because you're so nice, well then I guess you're doing something right. Right.
Yeah. So it's worked out good for me, because that's just
critics,
who
you
I
have
am.
fans.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Right.
Write that down.
This goes on a shirt.
Ooh. Well, cool, man. So, what's your next bold move?
My next bold move.
As if all of this was not enough.
It is. It is bold, isn't it?
It is. Never made a book. Made a book. Never
Yeah.
made a magazine. Made a magazine. Never collaborated on beer.
Don't know how to make beer. Made a beer.
Yeah.
Right?
That's bold moves.
Yeah. Video. I want to jump more into video, and I kind of hide behind a little bit of, I don't really understand how to edit. I don't understand my camera, but now I understand Premiere Pro. Now I understand my camera. So all my excuses are going out, you know. So I want to do like a vlog style. Are you familiar with Casey Neistat?
Yeah. I never say his last name right. Yes, but
it might not be right either. So over the past few years, I've wanted to figure out like how I want to do a vlog. I want to do more video content, and I just couldn't figure it out, like the style that I wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
So I finally came across this guy, and I'm watching the videos. I'm like, dude, this is it. Like, I love this guy's style. So I text Luke, and I was like, dude, I found it. I'm like, check. Have you ever heard of Casey Neistat? He's like, yeah, dude. He's like the godfather of vlogging. I'm like, really? Like, so that's how out of the loop I am sometimes. So this guy that's been doing it for years and has millions and millions of followers and all that, pioneer of this, I didn't even know who he was. You know. So, but it was good, because I might not have looked at it as like, oh, I'm copying his style. Sure. Right. Now I can copy it and say I've never heard of him. So no, I'm just kidding.
Wait, you just admitted you heard of him. No. Oh no.
But no, I dig his style of because I'm not good at like live. I'm not good at doing like a introduction type of like, hi, I'm Eric on location here at Simple Machine. But if things are rolling, and I've got certain things that I can do.
You got your home base.
Yeah. So when I saw his style, I'm like, okay, he tells a story, right? He comes in here and he talks to people and he gets footage of the beer, but then he sits down and he tells a story, or somehow he tells a story. So that kind of influenced the way that I want to do it, where basically coming in, I have a story that I want to tell, but then I'm going to tell the story, right? I'm going to tell the story about this place, just sitting here at the table with the beer. So that was my way of thinking out loud to say that I want to do video. That's my next bold move. But as you can see, I have the overthinking problem of it. So that's
why you have a business partner.
That's my yeah exactly.
You don't have to be all things to all people, right? That's why you mitigate your flaws, if you want to call them that, with other people, and I think that's part of building a strong team.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
So, cool, man. Well, as if people won't be able to find you. If you type that in, you'll find him. But for the sake of argument, let's go ahead and have you just share where people can find you, what people should be looking for online and in person.
Yes. Okay, so the magazine, we'll start with those. Taste of AZ, we got a magazine. We also have a podcast, which has a video podcast as well. Sweet. And the website. So all that's found at tasteofaz.com. You got the Arizona Beer Book at thearizonabeerbook.com. We try to keep it simple, right?
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward.
And then the podcast, tap.az and A Taste of AZ on all the podcast apps. You can go to atasteofaz.com and follow all of the adventures of what we're doing.
And if you're local, you're able to come to Simple Machine Brewing, which is at 7th Ave and Deer Valley. Get some yummy beer here.
Not now, it's sold out. Depends on the timing of it.
Oh no.
It comes and goes. So we brew it pretty consistently.
Yeah.
But there's usually a month or so in between each
We'll call
batch.
ahead then.
Yeah, there you go.
Or whatever. Or
there's
just take
also
the risk. Take the risk.
There might be some across the valley too in beer shops.
Okay.
So there are beer shops across the valley that carry it too.
Sweet.
Yeah. Also Flying Basset down in Gilbert has Haka Shakalaka.
There you go.
So
and then the bandana one.
Jean-Claude bandana yet to be released.
Yet to be released. Highly anticipated.
Yet to be planned also too. I'm the only one with the plan at this point.
There you go.
I have to share it with the other people involved.
That's always important.
Yeah. But I can be pretty convincing at times. But yeah, I would say the base is tap.az. With tap.az, I try to share everything with the Taste of AZ and all that. That's sometimes the problem is getting the message out, right? You can have a good message, but how do you get it out to the masses? So.
Well, you started with the important part, which is having a good, solid brand in which it's worth telling the story of. So I think that's exciting.
Thanks, man.
So thank you so much for being on the podcast. Super pleasure to be on here. I think this is like a great look at branding from the very, very start and how to develop a healthy brand. And so thank you for sharing.
Absolutely,
I really
man.
Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, dude. This was great.
Cool.
Yeah.
Wanna cause no problems. I just wanna live my life, but I keep on hearing about nonsense. Me and my dons ain't mobsters, but you know when you see imposters. We know how to read them faces, same way you know how to read them comments. If you wanna talk, let's talk, but around here, make sure you walk and your talk is constant.